Welcome back, everyone, to another video. As you can tell by the lovely Danny DeVito shirt and the wet hair and the fact I'm stood in front of the door because the rest of my room's a mess because I'm packing to go back to my family home for Christmas. This is the second video of two, much like the Ross interview, but this one is with Chris Van Vliet of the tremendously popular Chris Van Vliet channel. Absolute wonderful guy, great chat. For the same project I interviewed Ross for. So surreal that I got to do this once again. Ignore my mad eyebrow thing. But yeah, spoke to Chris for a while and it was great, and it was so surreal that I get to do this, and hopefully we can have more of these interview videos in the new year. But for now, I hope you enjoy the video and I will see you soon. So, ladies and gentlemen, I am joined here with an incredible guest. This is very surreal for me. I have spent a lot of time watching his interviews on YouTube. There was one day at the start of lockdown, I think I was playing just my PlayStation. I woke up, put his channel on, and sat for 12 hours playing Horizon Zero Dawn, listening to wrestling interviews.
Man.
Didn't realise it had taken that long. I got up and I was like, oh, it's dark outside. That's...
Wow.
It is the wonderful Chris Van Vliet. Chris, how you doing?
Well, I'm doing great, Jake. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me.
Of course. So this is like another video I did with Ross from Cultaholic where we're talking about nostalgia in wrestling and seeing if wrestling fans from all eras feel the same way about the wrestling of their childhood. And what was the stuff that you first got into? What's your earliest memories of wrestling, pretty much?
Very first memories would be, I guess you'd call it the golden era. I'm a child of the 80s. I was born in 1983. So I remember being at like my grandparents' house and wrestling would just be on. Not that my grandfather was a huge wrestling fan, but it would just be on because we loved watching sports. So if baseball or football or, I'm from Canada. So if hockey wasn't on, wrestling would be on a Saturday night. So I remember being introduced to the larger than life characters of Hulk Hogan, Macho Man, Ultimate Warrior, but also some of the more character-driven people like Repo Man and Sergeant Slaughter, Coco Beware. I remember doing this, Coco Beware.
I was going to mention Coco Beware. I absolutely love Coco Beware, and I don't know what it is.
Doink the Clown. I remember thinking Repo Man was great for some reason.
Repo Man is great.
So these were my earliest memories. I wasn't like a major fan then. I became like a really hardcore, diehard fan, and I'd say 98 with the Attitude Era.
I was going to say mine was kind of similar because everyone's got the way they kind of get in. It's like they're not really like seeking wrestling out. And mine was, I remember going to like stay with my mum's like friend when I was like 4, and she had kids who were like 16 or something, and they had like the first SmackDown versus Raw on PlayStation. Yes. And I was like, I just saw like Rey Mysterio and I saw the Hurricane and I was like, I'm in. I'm sold on this. And then my dad bought me Judgment Day 2006 on DVD. And the first match is Paul London and Brian Kendrick versus Eminem. And I just remember watching it. I was like, this is great. This is the best thing in the world.
Right. Yeah. And there's something about wrestling that like, once you get sucked into it, like you're in. You're all the way in on it.
Oh, yeah. Because when I said in the last one, Ross kind of said that. First of all, as well, did you ever have a period of time when you stopped liking wrestling, or not stopped liking it, but you kind of took a bit away? Because everyone kind of does that.
Yeah, I think wrestling's like very cyclical. And when I was in college, so this would have been 2001 to 2005, I still watched it, but I'd say 2000, maybe 4 or 5, I just wasn't watching it as much. I went from watching literally everything. I went from watching Raw and Nitro and SmackDown and ECW when that was still around, and Metal and Jacked and Heat, to kind of watching it if it was on, or just kind of keeping up with the storylines. Yeah. But I didn't watch it as much. I wasn't like as much of a diehard fan. And I'd actually say that 06, 07, I was probably watching more TNA than I was watching WWE.
See, I discovered TNA when I was 2009. It was coming up for lockdown, and still to this day, Alex Shelley is my favorite wrestler of all time. Motorcycle Machine Gun's my favorite tag team of all time. And I think I just turned it on and I saw he had the X Division title and he was doing backflips. And I was like, yeah, WWE got rid of the Cruiserweight title a couple of years ago. I like this guy. Or it was for Destination X, not Lockdown. So he lost the title that weekend, but I was like still just hyper fixated on the Motorcycle Machine Guns. But I remember around about 2009 with like Vladimir Kozlov. Even at 9 years old, I was like, not for me. Whatever's happening over there, not for me. Right. And then I went on to TNA, and then I moved to Ireland, and we stopped getting like the channels that WWE was on. So I kept watching TNA. And then when I was like 14, I was like, don't like wrestling anymore. But I would still like watch TNA on the slide to like find out who finally beat EC3. And if EC3 hadn't gone up, because I hated them, they'd like really wound me up. But if EC3 hadn't gone undefeated for so long, I don't know if I'd still be into wrestling because I was like, I don't like wrestling anymore. But has he been beat yet? Nah, I don't.
That's interesting.
Yeah, just it kept going, and then eventually, it was like maybe 2 years of like I would like stockpile because I've had them on like the set to record every week. I would maybe go like 2 months without watching, and then I would like do the highlights of a show. But then I'd be like, oh, is that he's come back? I'll watch this match, and then when I was like 15, I was like, nah, I'm fully in on it. But you mentioned guys like Coco Beware and then, you know, the TNA stuff. Is there any like weirder characters or people that you wouldn't really necessarily think of that you were like very drawn to the way I was with like Alex Shelley and London and Kendrick?
Yeah, and this is gonna sound so weird, but one of my favorites was from WCW. I was a big Sean Stasiak fan.
Oh.
And he had this, I just, you know, I was really starting to get into wrestling. I was thinking like, I wanted to do this. I was going to start training. And I just loved how over the top his Sean the Star Stasiak gimmick was. He would beat the person, then he would sign an 8x10 and leave it on their chest. And I was just like, wow, what a great character.
That's so good.
He also had this taunt where he walked to the ring and he wiped the sweat off and then flicked it in the camera. I was like, oh man, that's exactly how I'd want my character to be. So, you know, Sean Stasiak had a great run in a very short window of time. And, you know, especially, it was kind of especially short because of the merger with WWE and WCW and the alliance and everything there. But WCW, I was a big fan, and I was very bummed out with what they did with him in WWE.
He was meat, wasn't he?
He was meat, but he was also like Craziak Stasiak from the planet Craziak or whatever it was. I was like, come on, this guy's great.
I do mean to get into WCW. Like I go on the network and I watch stuff, and I want to look at like the weird and wonderful stuff because I know there's so much weird stuff going on. But then I just see like Jushin Liger versus Rey Mysterio, and I'm like, I'll just watch that. And then
look, and this is what's great about wrestling. I love that wrestling runs the gamut of like these super serious, incredible acrobatic matches, and then you know, stuff that's a little bit silly, and then you've got everything in between.
Because I looked at it, I found like things just on my phone or like tweets that were coming up, and it was like pretty much every year since like 2015, I've just been like all in on a totally different kind of wrestling each year. So when I first got in, I was all about like Will Ospreay because I was like, he's doing lots of flips, I love this guy. And then it was Okada and Shibata, and now it's just John Silver. Not for anything he does in the ring, even though he's great. It's everything he does on Being the Elite. John Silver is my favorite wrestler.
He's very entertaining. And look, it's hard to not like Will Ospreay. I mean, sure, he does flips, but he's also like, he has that real like strong style. Man, big fan. I think he's the best wrestler in the world right now.
Me and my flatmate, we went to a show in Dublin, OTT, their 4th anniversary would have been, and he was wrestling Walter in the main event. And I remember like when we were coming back, my flatmate turned out and then he was like, I think I might want to be a pro wrestler. And I was like, how? And there was a bit in it because Walter was doing his big mega evil man heel run, and he's got the OTT title and he's not letting go of it. And there's a bit that Will's just fighting, and then eventually the ref gets knocked out and he just grabs a belt. And for a minute, 2,000 people in this like boxing arena in Dublin, all of us like, you know, 2018 to like however, we all know what's going on. We all know what wrestling is. Yeah. And he runs at him with a belt, and then he stops at the last second, winks at him, and hits him with a big spin kick. And it was for a 2,000 people were all like 6 years old, like just like begging him not to hit him with the title.
Yeah,
there's something about seeing him live that's great.
Sure.
So one thing as well, just speaking about obviously the fact that a guy like Will Ospreay can make it so big in Japan and be known in America. Do you think like 2020 is the best time to be a wrestling fan?
Yes and no. Like, so I've been saying since last year that, you know, it's the best time to be a wrestling fan, best time to be a wrestler as well. 2020 has been a weird, you know, time. Obviously.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of in general because 2020 has been.
In general, absolutely, sure. The present is the best time, but like, if someone were to start watching wrestling today, you would have to give them a whole bunch of caveats. You'd have to be like, all right, so normally, you know, the crowd would be singing along to this person's theme, and normally they'd be saying the words here. Normally they'd, you know,
so my girlfriend's been like, God bless her. I'll be watching it, and she tries to get interested, and she likes Orange Cassidy. She loves the Fiend. She's got her characters that she really likes. She likes Nikki Cross, I think, just because she's Scottish. And my girlfriend's like, I'm on board. And she'll like put it on sometimes, and she'll be like, I don't get it. I was like, right, I know, but look, It's because there's no one in. And
Right. And this is why I say that yes, and also no. So yes, because there's more options than there's ever been, but no, because wrestling of all the sports, of all the entertainment, has taken the biggest hit, in my opinion, of not having fans there. And I did an interview with Shane Helms recently, and he had the perfect analogy. He said, this is like watching stand-up comedy without a crowd.
yeah,
You don't know, is this funny? Should I be laughing?
because
I
it's
don't
one
know.
of those things, like, obviously, like with football or soccer, and then like American football and like basketball, they've all come back and they've had no fans, but that doesn't really matter because basketball and football and stuff like that isn't inherently made to play off a crowd.
Yeah.
Whereas even like stuff like boxing, they're just there to go and try and knock someone out. Whereas in wrestling, it's all about, it's a whole dance and it's a whole like performance. And that's a good one actually, because there are no stand-up shows now going on.
Right. Well, someone explained it to me recently that UFC is actually thriving right now because it's the purest form. You're not being affected by the crowd booing you if you're not advancing. You're not, the judges aren't being affected by the crowd's reaction. It's a pure just fight between two guys. Whereas WWE, AEW, all of these, Impact Wrestling, all across the board, it's a completely different thing without that crowd there. So yeah, the answer is yes, it's the best time because we can go on YouTube and watch literally any match ever. We can go on the WWE network and watch anything we want. You can run the gamut of any type of match that you want to see. It's all available. But I like everybody else, are so excited for when we can have quote unquote normal shows again.
Yeah. Because as well, like for me, me and my flatmate, my best pal, we bought the Club Progress thing, which was like Progress being like, you get money off like merch, and then you get discounts for shows. And there's like one tier specifically for people who planned on traveling to London for Super Strong Style. So we booked our Super Strong Style tickets, we booked our hotels, we booked our flights, we were ready to go. And then 2 months before, everything just closed. And it was, in fact, even before that, I was going back to Dublin for a big AEW show on St. Patrick's Day weekend, which would have been crazy. And now it's someone we now can't mention because it turned out he was a very bad man, but he was wrestling Jon Moxley. I won't mention his name. I don't want to promote him because of all the awful stuff that came out about him, but he was about to wrestle Jon Moxley in Dublin. And I was literally on the flight, got off, unlocked my phone, text my mum, and I was like, yep, I'll come get you in the car. It'll be like 5 minutes. Check Twitter, and then I see that like the announcement is no indoor gatherings of over like 20 people are allowed in Ireland anymore. I was like, oh yeah, cool. That's fun. So I had those two snatched away from me, and it's been quite heartbreaking.
Yeah,
but to the point, I know obviously you're saying wrestling is not struggling, but it's been the most affected by no fans. AEW, I think, has been like did very well at dealing with it. Do you think that's maybe because they just started and they need to be a lot more like adaptable with this? Because obviously Dynamite started last October. They hadn't even been going 6 months before they had to do it with no fans, and I think they've been fantastic. It's been some of the best wrestling I've seen this year. Whereas WWE's been a bit touch and go.
AEW's had more shows without a crowd than they have with the crowd, which is so crazy to think about. Yeah, I would say the biggest thing that AEW has going for them is not having that history. WWE has a 40-year history of these are how our shows look, these are how our shows sound, these are how our shows function. AEW came in, they were rolling, and then this thing kind of happened out of nowhere. And I think the biggest thing that could have worked in their favor is the fact that the Khan family owns the stadium in Jacksonville, and they have Daly's place there. I don't know where they would be doing the shows otherwise.
Yes.
But I think that AEW did some really good things off the start. AEW put the focus where the focus needed to be. They pointed the camera at the ring. They pointed the camera at the entranceway. If you flick channels and turn it on to NXT on that first week, they basically shone a light on the audience and went, hey, look, everybody, no one's here. And it was just like, why are you showing people what you don't want them to see?
Yes, because I remember like the first show without fans was a SmackDown, and I remember I was back in my old bedroom at my mum's house in Ireland, and I was just watching it, and like Triple H gave that big speech at the beginning, and then
Yeah.
Triple H went on commentary and just started making fun of Michael Cole. And I was like, this is great, but this is like a one-off thing that they've just thrown together last minute to give everyone a wee laugh. When it comes to like Raw on Monday or NXT on Wednesday or SmackDown again next week, they're going to go back to a more serious thing. And I think the biggest problem for WWE, from the stuff I've seen, is they've not adapted their in-ring presentation in the way that AEW has to just... I know they've got more fans in, but back at the start, AEW were doing no... Even if it was like crowd-pleasing stuff, they were going just focus on the match as if we were practicing it out and getting it perfect, whereas WWE were still doing a lot of stuff as if crowd were still there, which took me out of it a bit.
Yeah, and look, I get that it's a tough time for all of us, and no one expected this to be... I mean, here we are in November, almost December. No one expected this to still be going on. In fact, we saw the memes early on in March where it was, people were playing the Rock Mankind empty arena match, and they're like, this is what Raw is going to look like, ha, ha, ha. And we went, well, that actually might be what Raw looks like. And then sure enough, Monday came around, and that's what it looked like. But, my hat's off to WWE for also... pivoting and finding a way to make this happen. The Thunderdome's been the best thing to happen in WWE this year. And,
I really like the Thunderdome.
Sure, it's not an ideal situation. Of course, they'd rather have an arena filled with 15,000 people, but it looks really good on TV. And the fact that they put this together as quickly as they did, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and I think it goes to show as well, that was like the thing for me that really showed WWE were like finding their footing with their way to present a WWE show without fans, because AEW just went, put the camera facing up the way, there's the ramp, so you don't need to see that there's no one here.
Yeah.
And then WWE did that in the Performance Center, but it felt weird watching Raw coming out of the Performance Center.
Yeah.
I think. And then with the Thunderdome, you've got they're just presenting it as they normally would, but with just the fans on the screen. So I think it's good to, obviously it gives WWE more of an identity in this weird empty arena.
I will say, though, that I was very surprised that the ratings didn't soar during the first few weeks of the pandemic. And I say that because on a normal Monday night, on a normal Wednesday night, on a normal Friday night, when everything's, open in the world, you could be doing any number of things. You could be out to dinner, you could be at a party, you could be, at a game. In the middle of March, literally everyone in the world, everyone in the world was sitting at home deciding not to watch wrestling. And that's what I thought was so strange. Everybody was sitting on their couch, in the middle of March into April. Everybody was sitting on their couch, and the ratings went down. And I thought that was really, really interesting.
Yeah, I think maybe, I don't know, just maybe one explanation for a few people was, I know that PlayStation, just as soon as it happened, as everything was announced, just put a massive sale on. Because I remember finding out it was going to be in for 2 weeks, and I just went on to the PlayStation Store. I think I got like 9 games for £40.
I think it's things like that. It's also like maybe you turned on Raw or turned on AEW or SmackDown.
It's just,
this is a reminder that the world's not normal right now.
Yeah, exactly. I think the best thing AEW did, because obviously they had that 8 weeks that they taped. I think 2 days they said at the start to bridge up to Double or Nothing, but it was the first show back in Daly's place with all the wrestlers who weren't on the card round the ring. That was a massive help, I think.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and they were the first ones to do that.
Yeah, that's just another thing now that I'm thinking about, because obviously then a couple of weeks later WWE did it, and then it got to the thing that I hate the most in wrestling right now. It's the whole, I'm a WWE fan, I'm an AEW fan, and I see it so much on Twitter, and I even my YouTube I just make mostly for fun, but also to help me with my course, my journalism course. But it's mostly for fun, and sometimes I'll just get comments because I do reviews weekly of Impact and AEW, and I think it's a big thing for me because there's so much wrestling happening. I could sit down and watch Raw, SmackDown, NXT, AEW, Impact, and I've got nothing else on. So realistically, I could, but I don't want to just sit in and watch 14 hours of wrestling a week, or how much it is.
It's a lot of wrestling, yeah. I agree with you. It's a strange thing that, the last time I checked, we're wrestling fans.
Yeah.
The last time I checked, we weren't WWE fans or AEW fans, Impact fans, New Japan fans. We were wrestling fans. And it's so strange that people can't wrap their head around the idea that you can, in fact, like 2 different flavors of ice cream. It's okay to have a scoop of chocolate and a scoop of, Rocky Road.
I always say when like Brian Alvarez like tweets out the ratings. First of all, I'll go and like read the comments just for a laugh because I just the sadist in me wants to see what's going on.
Right.
But then I just look at it and I'm like, the thing that everyone should be taking away from this is the fact that on a Wednesday night, which is not a wrestling night, Raw's been around, pushing 30 years, SmackDown's been around 20. Wednesday's only been a wrestling night for about 5. And there's usually between like 1.2 and 1.5 million people in America alone tuning in for wrestling. I don't know why people just have this hard time of accepting that. That's brilliant, because it is.
I'm with you. But I get it. I think it's good. It's healthy competition, and I think that WWE having competition on national television for the first time in almost 20 years, I think it's a really good thing for wrestling.
Just as someone who grew up through the Attitude Era and the Monday Night Wars, was it like that? Was it as cutthroat as this back then? If you were
good,
like,
good question.
And you're like,
good
question. Did you
question,
see the Mankind match? They were like, no, because I was watching Goldberg, because I'm better than you, because I watched WCW.
It's hard to gauge it because the internet was like so much in its infancy at that time. I mean, we're talking 98, 99, 2000. So, most people weren't on the internet. And if they were, it was like to check their email and that was that. So if social media had existed then, yeah, it probably would have been like that. But I remember going to my high school and, your friend might have said, I watched Nitro last night. Did you see this thing that Hogan and Sting did? And I might say, hey, I watched Raw last night. Did you see this thing that Austin McMahon did? And it wasn't like, I can't believe you watched Nitro. What's wrong with you? It was just like, oh, cool. I'll have to check that out. Yeah, I just felt like people were more accepting of it. But again, we didn't have the noise from social media that we have now.
Yeah. Like I try watching NXT as much as I can, but I think I watch my Tours of Impact on a Tuesday night, or typically a Wednesday morning, and then I just set my phone up, record my wee 20-minute review or whatever, watch AEW that night, record that as soon as I wake up, and then I'm like, I could watch NXT, but I don't have classes on a Wednesday. I'm like, I could just go back to bed. Or Wednesday and Thursday I've got no classes. I'm like, I could watch NXT or just look at the covers and
just watch a lot of wrestling if you don't have classes.
Yeah. That's definitely been one thing. At the start of lockdown, back when we all foolishly thought this was 2 weeks, maybe a month, in and out, I started a thread on my Twitter of just every wrestling match I watched, or every piece of wrestling related media I watched. So a few of your interviews in there, your one with Eddie Kingston, I loved, because I love Eddie Kingston. And I just remember tweeting that, and after 3 weeks, I was like, realistically, there's no end to lockdown, so I'm just going to stop keeping this thread up. Because if that was still going now, it would be thousands of tweets long.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Look, I'm hopeful that things can go back to the normal way that it was, before. And I can't wait. I can't wait to go see a show in person.
Oh, I am so excited. I realize we've kind of veered off the topic of the nostalgia. So we'll bring it back with a few sort of questions. Do you think there's anyone that you grew up watching that would fit in now better than they did then, and vice versa? Is there anyone now you think would be a better fit on Nitro in '97?
So someone back then that would fit in better now. Look, I don't know if everyone got a fair shake back then. I think that was an era of, in the late 90s, early 2000s, I think that a lot of independent stars got overlooked. I think that when, the odd person did get in, if you weren't 6'3" and 250 pounds, you just didn't get a fair shot. So I think that there's a lot of those smaller guys who in that era, just didn't get a fair shake. Like someone I mentioned him earlier, but someone like Shane Helms is such a great, incredible worker, but he was just always seen as the cruiserweight guy. And then when he became the Hurricane, he was just seen as the comedy guy. But I feel like someone like him now could have the, amazing success that someone like an Orange Cassidy is having right now.
Yeah.
I just think that there'd be a real niche for those characters. I mean, the characters that were really doing well in the late 90s were Triple H and Stone Cold Steve Austin, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, the tough guy, big muscular characters. And I just think that there were some smaller guys, man, especially some ECW guys. I think a lot of those ECW guys, when they signed their deals with either WCW or WWE just got a bad deal. Like Mike Awesome got made to be just look like an absolute idiot in WCW.
Mike Awesome's been one of the people that I think before this year, I knew he was good and I knew that everyone loved him, but I never actually took time out my day to sit down and watch 2 or 3, 4 Mike Awesome matches. I'd done it with Taz, so I'd seen some stuff he'd done with Taz, but I'd never properly sat down and watched Mike Awesome for an hour or two, and it's so good. And then you think about how he went to WCW and just got dealt the hand he was dealt. And then Taz as well. Taz obviously famously talked about getting the pop against Triple H, and he went, dear, that's that.
Yeah, so we could talk about this literally for an hour, but it's just a different era. It's comparing apples to oranges. To take someone from this era, who I think would be a star in the Attitude Era, I think that's tough, because the Attitude Era was filled with the biggest stars the wrestling industry's ever seen.
Or maybe even earlier, doesn't it? Be the Attitude Era, just someone from something you grew or you watched growing up that you think.
Yeah, well, if we take someone from now, would they be a bigger star back then? I think that there's the people that are stars right now are they're just full of talent. But I would love to see a guy imagine if a guy like Bobby Lashley had debuted in the 90s.
Yeah.
And this is no slight at Bobby Lashley. Bobby Lashley's had an incredible career, but if Bobby Lashley had debuted in the 90s, I just feel like he could have been a huge star. Could have, really broken a lot of barriers. He could have been, the first ever Black WWE champion at the time, or, I think there could have been some really, really big things there for him.
Because as well, I think watching his TNA and his Impact stuff, because I watched a lot, TNA was my big thing for, a good 6 years. And all the stuff he was doing over there was just absolutely incredible. And then he came back and he started posing and flashing his backside at the camera. And,
right. Right.
I think I remember, because I think Leo Rush did an interview recently where he said that was all meant to be leading to Elias breaking the guitar off his ass, and that was going to be the big payoff to it. But it was around the time that Elias had just got a sponsorship with Fender, and they were still trying to work out how to gimmick Fender guitars.
Oh my gosh!
It was Finn Balor got hurt, and then I think maybe Rollins got hurt with a guitar. And 3 people got hurt in 3 months because they were still trying to work out how to make Fender guitars safe for just a big hole. So then that was cancelled, and it ended with, I don't know if you remember. Do you know what? As much as I hated all that stuff and I thought this segment was going to be really naff, it was actually brilliant against all odds. It was, do you remember the pose down that he had with Apollo Crews?
Yes.
And that was the end to the pose carry on. I really enjoyed that, but for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, I'm glad we're not doing that anymore. In fact, the Hurt Business might be the best thing that happened to Bobby Lashley.
Oh, yeah, the Hurt Business are fantastic. And I'm really happy to see MVP get another shot, because he's one of those guys that when he was in TNA, I was hooked on. He was also one of my secret shames, along with the EC3 undefeated streak. It was when he was doing the Beatdown Clan. I was like, oh, I like this. That's cool.
But talk about a guy who took the ball and ran with it, because to my understanding, MVP was only brought in as a one-time thing because he lived in Florida. And then, it worked. They brought him back another week, and it just kept working.
He was brought in for the Rumble because I think his son wanted to see him wrestle in WWE.
Okay.
So I think he phoned Vince and was like, hello, can I be in the Rumble, please? My son really wants to see me wrestle in WWE. And Vince was like, cool, obviously. And you come. And then maybe did a couple of other things. And then the shutdown happened, and they were like, you're local, please come help us. We need all the help we can get.
Yeah, look at him now.
Yeah, exactly. Just before we go, I kind of want to talk about some of the people you've interviewed.
Sure.
So I saw you did a tweet the other day, and it was your 5 most recent interviews were, I believe, JTG, Alex Hammerstone, Ricky Starks, Ryan from Pro Wrestling Tees, and then Luke from Modern Family, Nolan Gold. And I was reading through the list, and I was like, Nolan Gold, it's Luke from Modern Family. But I was interested with the Pro Wrestling Tees one. I've not watched it yet, but I don't understand why. I get why there's not something there's kind of like that now in the UK with On the Gear, like a place that's just a warehouse for wrestlers to send their stuff and get it all printed up. But that must be so handy for wrestling fans out in America. I know you've got some stuff in Pro Wrestling Tees, and I am absolutely choking for if they open a mini Pro Wrestling Tees warehouse over here. because
Well,
some of the stuff on there like, is great. And I remember seeing they tweeted like, "Oh, we've worked out shipping things with a new company, so the shipping will be less." I'm like, "Oh, cool. Let's try and get a T-shirt." Oh, it's still $15 to get it.
yes, but what they've done here is they've completely changed the wrestling industry, because
Oh
it
yeah,
used to be, if you were a wrestler, you had to go out and buy 3 smalls, 7 mediums, 15 extra large. You know, you had to stock that all in your house, and then you sold them on your website, or you had people PayPal you through Twitter or Instagram. What Ryan's done with Pro Wrestling Tees is basically said, send me your designs. When someone orders your shirt, I'll print them as we go. So we don't actually need to carry inventory.
yeah,
All we need to carry is blank shirts, and then we'll just print them as they get
yeah.
made.
Because like that's the thing. Like that's like the thing in the UK still. I think like On the Gear launched, but they've not got any like big UK indie guys. They've got like some like getting up there kind of level, but no like massive names like a Chris Brooks or like an Aussie Open or someone like that. So
Yeah.
it's still a lot of people just going, okay, let's order 40 T-shirts off of Gildan and then let's bring it to the nearest screen printing place and then keep it in the corner of my room.
Well, when when Pro Wrestling Tees got guys like Stone Cold Steve Austin and Diamond Dallas Page, Bret Hart, I think that people went, oh, like this is a real thing now.
Yeah, I definitely think the UK scene could definitely benefit from a Pro Wrestling Tees type thing.
And I hope that they can. I hope that they get something like that.
I would love it because I've spent a lot of money on different big cartels. Just I remember there was one time I had I think three wrestlers were like dropping stuff at the same time, and I had like my phone, and then my laptop, and then my girlfriend's phone, just on 3 different big cartels. So I made sure that none of them sold out. I was like, "Can I just borrow it?" She was like, "Why?" I was like, "Just it'll be a minute, please." So who are some of the biggest names that I know obviously you've interviewed Childish Gambino and Anne Hathaway, but then as well obviously Big Show, Cena. I was going to say actually the Cena interview is one of my favourite videos on YouTube, the one from Mania a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Because I'm assuming you felt kind of how I feel like in this. You were like, "I don't want to waste your time, you're John Cena." And he was like, "No, I know how much time I've got." Like
so he told me we had 10 minutes. So here's the backstory on it. A mutual friend had connected us to make this interview happen. And he was basically like, I've got a very small window. It's WrestleMania weekend. But if you meet me at the gym, we can do this interview for 10 minutes before I go to this book signing. I said, absolutely. So I got there, texted him that I was there. And he texted me and said, I just finished my workout and I can't see you. And I'm not trying to be funny. So we finally, we meet up. I'm over here. You're over here. Okay. So we finally met up. As soon as he walked over, it was like, boom, let's like start rolling the camera. Let's do this thing. Let's take advantage of every second that we get of these 10 minutes. I wanted to be super respectful of his time. So at the 10-minute mark, I started wrapping him up. And that's when he reached into his pocket, grabbed his phone. We still got more time. What? Okay. But to answer your question, who are some of the biggest people I've interviewed? Yeah, you named a bunch of them, but I've also been so fortunate as an entertainment reporter to travel the world and interview some of the biggest stars in the world. So I've interviewed Tom Cruise, Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie, Meryl Streep, Morgan Freeman, George Clooney. I mean, the list goes. Steven Spielberg.
Your Emmys behind you there on the.
Sorry, we're cutting off a few of them.
Oh, there's more.
There we go.
There we go.
So, I mean, I've been very fortunate to interview, almost everyone. Tom Holland and.
Because that was one thing when I discovered your channel, it was through like wrestling interviews. And then I subscribed because I watched like 2 or 3. I was like, oh yeah, this guy's class. And then like one day it just came up in my like subscription feed. It was like Tom Holland talks about like Spider-Man or something. I was like, wait, what? And then I looked into you and I found out you've done a lot of stuff. You are.
Yeah, and I got to, so I was uploading a lot of my celebrity interviews for a while. And then I got to a point where I was like, the wrestling interviews are really like doing well. And especially because I was doing a lot of wrestling interviews that not everybody else was doing. If you do an interview with Tom Holland for Spider-Man, 80 other people are doing an interview with Tom Holland for
the exact same
day. So, if you do an interview like the one I did with John Cena, that was the only interview he did that weekend. Maybe the only interview he did that month. I don't know. But so I was just like, well, I've kind of got like something unique with these interviews. So I'm just going to run with it. And that's when like about 2 years ago, just kind of said, not going to post the celebrity interviews anymore. I'm just going to post wrestling interviews.
Fair. Yeah. It's
although now on my podcast, and you mentioned Nolan Gould from Modern Family. I've started peppering in some interviews with celebrities on my podcast, just because my podcast is all about just having insightful conversations with interesting people. I want to reverse engineer what makes someone great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was unaware of your podcast, but I'll definitely check that out.
Oh, please. If you could rate and subscribe, I would be forever indebted to you.
Of course. Yeah, no, I'll give that a listen tonight. I'm midway through a Liam Payne on Jack Makes Happy Hour, which is,
nice.
Don't know if you're familiar with that podcast, but that's been really good. So yeah, I think don't have any more questions. We kind of got through everything, talked, went off script, just kept it going. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been unreal. Do you have anything you want to plug to the tiny audience on the Jake McFarlane channel?
Well, you can find me at Chris Van Vliet anywhere on social media, and here on YouTube, my channel is just called Chris Van Vliet. Is that an Irish flag behind you? I thought you were Scottish.
It is. So I was born in Scotland, but my grandmother was from Ireland. And then I lived here till I was 12, and then I moved to her hometown when I was 12, lived there till I was 19. Then I moved back to Scotland for college. So do you have a hybrid Scottish-Irish accent? Yeah, it really depends on who I'm talking to. Like my flatmate.
What if you're talking to someone who lives in America?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to use as little slang and pronounce all my T's, and something you don't hear a lot when you're kicking about Glasgow.
You sound like Drew McIntyre to me.
I don't know how to take that, because he's got a weird bastardized Scottish accent.
Does he?
Oh, he moved to Florida when he was like 20 or something. And I mean, Drew's the best. I love him, but like it's like if you're here and like speak to people like from around where he's from, they sound nothing like them. But then Seamus has kept the Irish accent.
Well, that's interesting.
100%.
What about Becky?
Oh yeah, Becky's still more like thick Dublin. I like Becky. I was laughing because Seamus is like a genuine celebrity in Ireland, even though no one watches wrestling. It's like I heard a story about someone was saying their friends like Ghanaian, and they're a wrestling fan, and like their mate at uni or something came around to their dorm and they saw like a Kofi Kingston poster, and they were like, "Oh, it's Kofi Kingston." They're like, "Oh, I thought you didn't like watch wrestling." He goes, "Yeah, I know, I don't, but he's like Ghana's #1 celebrity." And I remember going around to my friend's house in Ireland, and I think I was wearing like a WWE t-shirt, and he saw like the WWE logo on it, and he was like, wrestling, yeah, don't watch it, but that's Sheamus. Love Sheamus.
That's funny.
He was like, I heard he was the champ a couple of years ago, so that's good. And then he was like asking me what Sheamus was doing, and I was showing him like video clips because it was around at the time of the bar. So I showed him, the infamous one where the infamous Cesaro hot tag.
Yeah.
I showed him that, and he was like, "It's good, but what was Sheamus up to? Was Sheamus getting battered? Because I don't. He's good, but what's Sheamus doing? That's what I care about."
I have been to Scotland once. I was in Scotland 2 years ago. It was so beautiful. I'm going to say this like a total Canadian/American. I was in Edinburgh. How am I supposed to say that?
Edinburgh.
Oh, I thought it was close.
Yeah,
Edinburgh.
Yeah. I've heard Edinburgh from a few people. That's.
Oh no.
Yeah, Edinburgh's beautiful. Although maybe it's just because I live in Glasgow. My sports team, my football team, or a Glasgow team. Glasgow's where I would go for most stuff. Like Glasgow is, I would definitely say for coming back, take some time out and come to Glasgow. I'll show you around. I'll show you the scenes.
Done. When we're allowed to do this again.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd love to go back.
All right. So thank you very much for coming on, and I will see you guys in my next video.